President Mohammed Bonde, Secretary General Guterres, distinguished guests, I appreciate this opportunity to say a few words on this important topic. As you know, this is the first high-level dialogue on financing for development since the UN member states adopted the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in 2015. So it's a fitting moment to reflect on the progress we're making towards financing the Sustainable Development Goals. We should also remember what's at stake. The SDGs provide a shared roadmap to realize the ambition of a world where all people have the chance to live healthy, productive lives. Financing for development provides the capability to implement that blueprint. But we're far from fulfilling the promise of the SDGs, and headwinds are putting progress at risk. In many developing countries, domestic resources are insufficient to pay for the essential building blocks of a better life, in particular, health and education. There are signs that official development assistance for the most vulnerable countries is at risk. Even further, a softening outlook for global growth, strains to multilateral cooperation, rising debt risks, and climate change all threaten our progress on the SDGs. There's no single solution to keep progress on track, but there are a few things I think can make a significant impact. We should start by recognizing that different development challenges require different types of financing. Rather than focusing on overall SDG financing in the abstract, we can target finance to specific needs, geographies, and groups of people. There are also concrete actions that governments and partners can take to increase financing for development objectives. The first is to mobilize the domestic public resources that development countries need to achieve their SDG goals. Today, there's a large gap between what's available and what's needed. The largest source of additional financing for the SDGs will have to come from increases in tax revenue. In low-income countries, the IMF estimates that extra domestic revenue can finance a third of the amount needed. Such an increase is necessary and possible, even as it must be accompanied by more efficient spending and foreign aid. So working with countries to strengthen their tax collection systems and the quality of their spending is central to closing the SDG funding gap. But simply setting broad targets for raising revenue may have unintended consequences. It can create the temptation to collect taxes wherever possible, even from the poorest in society. To avoid this, developing countries should strive to make their tax systems more progressive. If citizens trust that a tax system is equitable and that they will receive services like health and education in return, they'll be more willing to pay taxes. A connected initiative that the Gates Foundation is strongly supportive of is the move towards more transparency. This will help us with both personal and corporate tax collection. Another urgent priority is protecting aid for development and better targeting that aid to where it's needed most. Aid plays a critical role in helping the least developed countries address basic human needs and reduce poverty. Here we see worrying trends. Preliminary data from the OECD shows that net aid flows from major donor countries to least developed countries fell by 2.7% in 2018, and aid to sub-Saharan Africa fell by 4.4%. Further retraction in aid flows may jeopardize not only our ambitions for the SDGs, but the progress we've already made to help improve the health and well-being of people around the world. There is enthusiasm for the potential of blended finance to unlock private sector financing for development. I've seen firsthand that the private sector can contribute to development, not only through investment, but also by sharing knowledge and accelerating innovation. But private sector financing is not a panacea. OECD data shows that between 2012 and 2017, less than 8% of private funding mobilized by blended finance went to low-income countries. And less than 10% of that went towards critical needs like health, education, and agriculture. Blended finance can achieve development objectives, for example, by de-risking early-stage innovation or scaling inclusive business models. But we need to be realistic about what gaps the private sector can and can't fill. We also need better data on the trade-offs of allocating concessional resources to blended finance, particularly for the poorest countries with critical public sector needs. Over the past 2 decades, the world has made amazing progress improving the lives of billions of people. Every country in the world has reduced child mortality. We've made significant strides in reducing poverty, although that reduction remains uneven within and between countries. Yet we still have so far to go to realize the full promise of the SDGs for all. Fulfilling that promise will require the political will to mobilize domestic resources equitably, protect aid, and target resources to where they are most needed. Thank you.